الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم ربنا أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي ربنا زدنا علما وعملا وإخلاصا يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصر أولياءك في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم انصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم احفظ بلاد الإسلام. اللهم احفظ بلاد الإسلام. اللهم احفظ بلاد الإسلام من كيد الكائدين ومن حقد الحاقدين ومن الطاعمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم رد كيدهم على نهورهم. اللهم زلزل أقدامهم وأنزل بهم بأسك الذي لا ترده عن القوم المجرمين. اللهم انصر بلاد الإسلام. اللهم انصر بلاد الإسلام. اللهم انصر أولياءك في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم انصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم فرج عنا وعن إخواننا في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم نفس كربنا وكربهم وثبت أقدامنا وأقدامهم والطف بنا وبهم يا أرحم الراحمين يا رب العالمين. وصلى وسلم على سيدنا وحبيبنا وشفينا وطبيب قلوبنا وإمامنا ومأوانا وملجأنا محمد وآله وصحبه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. We're continuing our reading of Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam. We've stopped here. We'll just go over something we had already started thinking about last time. Events, so his conception of time is shaping up here, or at least part of it is, which he thinks is neglected by the theory of relativity. Events don't happen. We simply meet them. That is in this conception of time. It seems like, I think according to Iqbal, in Einstein's conception of time, employed by his theory of relativity, it doesn't have events don't happen. We simply meet them because they are predetermined. And happening here is something which has true creativity, and one of the hallmark of creativity, it seems like, for Iqbal, is unpredictability, probably even lack of foreknowledge as well. So if we go back, he's saying that time as a free creative movement has no meaning in the theory, that is, in the theory of relativity. Time as a free creative movement, it does not pass. This is the explanation of it. Events do not happen, we simply meet them. Time doesn't pass. Again, we are not trying to assess, which I think it gets Einstein wrong, but that's not the point. So according to him, if we look at time from the perspective of Einstein theory, it doesn't pass, it doesn't flow. The time doesn't have its own reality, I guess. Events don't happen, we simply meet them. Okay. So although we did go over this last time, just try to think a bit more about it. What is it all challenging? Concept of time, not only in Einstein theory of relativity, concept of time as an abstract notion, mathematical notion, concept of time as the conventional notion of time time as a linear progression is challenging all these in a way which do sound counterintuitive, at least to a certain extent. Okay, so what is the core idea? Alam Iqbal, core idea in terms of what he is for in this conception of time and what he is rejecting, what is he against. Okay, let's try to think about it. So Alam Iqbal's understanding is, again, we are not saying that that understanding is partially or entirely true, but for him, so there is two conception of times: static probably static and dynamic. So he is for dynamic conception of time. He doesn't say that we can't use a static conception of time for scientific purposes. But what he is objecting to is, I think, considering this time, conception of time as the true representation of what time is actually in total. Again, which is not to say that he is correct in his assessment. That's what the theories he is critiquing do. Okay. On the other hand, dynamic, so in time as a in static conception of time, time is not a dynamic flow. So it's not like in his poetry, often Allama Iqbal expresses time and its flow through rivers and their flow through mountains, especially in the context of Himalaya and Kashmir. Where his forefathers originally come from. So it is not something, a static conception is not something which moves, in which time moves. Or ellipses, as we usually perceive it, I think from a subjective viewpoint. Okay, so this is the first point. So if events don't happen, according to Iqbal, in this conception of time, he is critiquing. It can imply two things, and probably he is critiquing, rejecting only one aspect. So events don't happen can imply that they don't come into existence sequentially. So probably even this one is critique. So the 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 so probably the view he is critiquing believe that they do come into existence sequentially. But the main thing is, I think, critiquing is um, we simply meet them. So if we simply meet them, that implies that uh, as we said yesterday, pre-existing reality, where all events past, present, and future uh, already in a way coexist. So he basically reject this conception of reality, and he's rejecting static conception of time because he thinks that implies this conception of reality is, for him, reality is being created all the time, and being created, and creation for him means something not pre-existing, something which probably even the creator, if there is one, doesn't know. Because if he knew, then for Alam Iqbal, this is not a creativity. It's actually not just it. This critique has implication not just for Einstein theory, but also for the notion of qaza and qadr in Islamic teachings. Okay, so let's go back to the text. Time as a free creative movement has no meaning for this theory. For the theory, it doesn't pass. Time doesn't pass. According to the theory, events don't happen. So that's the interpretation of passing. We simply meet them. So it's not just a critique of a conception of time, but a critique of a conception of reality purportedly implied by that conception of time. So, and here he goes explicitly, it must not, however, be forgotten that the theory neglects certain characteristics of time as experienced by us. So that's where subjective experience, which doesn't mean that it doesn't represent reality, but that's the experience that's the dimension of time which can only be experienced subjectively, cannot be described mathematically. So the theory misses that, obviously. Although again, it's very it's not entirely true that Einstein doesn't have, like when he talks about time from his theory of relativity from a layman's perspective, even from a philosophical perspective, he does in his writings, Einstein does mention a subjective conception of time. So it must not, however, be forgotten that there is certain time as experienced by us, and it's not possible to say that the nature of time is exhausted by the characteristic which theory does note in the interest of systematic account of those aspects of nature which can be mathematically treated. So that also makes clear that he is not rejecting a mathematical conception of time as useful or even as a true representation of aspects of time, but what he is critiquing is any philosophical viewpoint which claims that this conception of time exhausts the reality of time. Um, so probably he will that view like philosophical views like determinism and eternalism, for example. Nor is it possible for us laymen to understand what the real nature of Einstein time is. It is obvious that Einstein time is not Bergson's pure duration. So Bergson's pure duration again touches on an Iqbal obviously is um, very much influenced by Bergson. Not influenced by, but I think that would be a wrong impression to give. He uses Bergson to uh, justify and even to express certain his own views. So, for example, here is subjective side of the a subjective side of the time which we experience, time as we experience, and which for him is not captured in the mathematical conception of time. That might be highlighted uh, by bringing in Bergson's notion of time. It should be mentioned that Allama Iqbal, one of Allama Iqbal's teachers, I think, uh, at Cambridge. I'm sure he was his teacher as well, but not entirely. But Allama Iqbal obviously read his work anyway, and probably their paths at least intersected at Cambridge. Was MacTaggart. Um, MacTaggart, uh, a great British philosopher who has certain conception of time and his division of time into A series and B series of time, etc. So that comes in to play as well. And also philosophical idealism, Hegel's philosophy and subjectivity of time also comes into play here. Anyway, we will come back to all this in the next sessions, inshallah. Subhanakallah wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk wa salli wa sallim ala sayyidina wa maulana Muhammadin wa ala ali sayyidina wa maulana Muhammadin wa barik wa sallim wa sallim. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Amin ya rabbil alamin.